can try and win championships, and that's what it's all about. When you look from the outside and you watch this team, I know we're going to have a real good, solid hockey team this year.
Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson, and today we're going to be discussing the recent rumors surrounding Artemi Panarin and the possibility of him requesting a trade. Now, there's been a recent report from Arthur Staple of The Athletic. He recently wrote an article about the Rangers, and he was categorizing all of the players on the team about which players might stay and which players might go. And he classified Artemi Panarin as a player who could be staying put, but for how long? And then he wrote a whole big spiel about this, basically a rift between GM Chris Drury and Artemi Panarin. Apparently, Drury is unhappy with Artemi Panarin's performance throughout the playoffs, and if this rift grows any greater, Artemi Panarin could be looking to get out of New York. So, Eric, how are you doing today? And what is your initial reaction to this news, or rumor rather, coming from Arthur Staple of The Athletic?
I'm doing good. This rumor that we've been hearing going around, I really just can't wrap my mind about it. Um, Panarin is pretty much the complete antithesis of Ryan Strome. Panarin is our greatest player on the team, and he's been showing that ever since we signed him in 2019. And, his performance in the playoffs this season might not have been everything that we wanted it to be, but he still ended up being like the third or fourth highest point scorer on the Rangers throughout their playoff run. So Chris Drury saying that he's upset with him in his play. Um, I'm not sure how that makes any sense. There are a lot of other players that were more to blame than Panarin, so we just gotta kind of hold on and hope that this rift doesn't grow large enough to the point where our best player would want to leave our team.
Yeah, and I'll say once again that it is a rumor, Chris Drury, and apparently one other source. So the exact quote is, quote, two league sources said Drury was vocally unhappy about Panarin's play in the postseason when he had 16 points in 20 games, but not the consistent impact anyone around the Rangers hoped or needed for. If there's a rift, Panarin could ask out, as near impossible as it would be to move his mammoth contract. And that's a full quote from Arthur Staple of The Athletic. So apparently two league sources, it's not only one league source, two sources are corroborating the same point that Drury was vocally unhappy within the Rangers organization about Artemi Panarin throughout the postseason. So it's kind of interesting to take a look, though. 16 points in 20 games, not really a bad stat line by any means. And you take a look at the rest of his stats, the 2022 playoffs. He did play in those 20 games. 6 of them were goals, 10 of them were assists. And you look at his career in the playoffs, he's played in 50 career playoff games. He's had 16 goals. He's had 28 assists, 44 total points in 50 games. So his production was, pretty much similar to how it's been his entire career throughout the playoffs. So I'm not exactly sure where the big discrepancy is coming from. Eric, what are your thoughts on the way that he played throughout the postseason? And is the criticism valid?
And I think he played just fine. There's been times where me and you have both said that he needs to shoot the puck more, stop trying to be too fancy, making these dumb passes. And like a couple times it did cost us a goal or two, but at the same time, he was also coming in with the most clutch goals. He scored the game 7 overtime winner to send us to the second round. Without him, we get eliminated in the first round. We don't make that comeback against Pittsburgh. And like you said, his stats these playoffs were relatively similar to his career playoff stats, like throughout like the entirety of his career. The only like negative stat you see on these is his plus minus. This playoffs he ended up being a -5, and throughout his career he was a -14 in the playoffs. But that's just simply because of the teams that he played on. When he was on Chicago and Columbus, they were kind of like at the tail end of like them being good. It wasn't a great team. And then throughout the playoffs this year with the Rangers, you're going up against 3 phenomenal teams, the Penguins, the Hurricanes, and then the Lightning. So of course you're not going to have a super crazy plus minus, but being an almost a point per game player throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs is an insane feat. So I'm just not sure how anyone can criticize him for this.
Yeah, and here's another interesting stat to take note of, and I'll kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate here and say where Artemi Panarin could have been better in the postseason, right? When you dig into his 16 points, Panarin could only muster 7 of them 5v5. So 3 goals, 4 assists in the even strength play. So really, when you're taking a look at it, most of his points are coming from power plays, and he's not really performing at the level, but in the even play. But Eric, we've kind of been discussing this. We started this podcast during the playoffs and during the postseason and taking a look at the games. And we were saying pretty much every single night, the Rangers need to be better in even play. They can't be scoring all of their points on power play. They need to be better at even strength. And that wasn't just an Artemi Panarin thing. That was a New York Rangers thing. So what are your thoughts on, Artemi Panarin's play versus power play or versus even strength, and kind of just discussing, where he should be in terms of playing at even strength?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid criticism that he didn't pick up that many even strength points throughout the playoffs. But like you said, this wasn't a solely an Artemi Panarin problem. The entire offense lacked in this aspect. So yeah, like he should have been producing 5v5 points, but at the same time, so should the rest of the team. I'm sure that I don't know the exact number, but whatever amount of even strength points that Panarin had, I guarantee it was higher than that of Ryan Strome's, maybe even like Kreider's or Vitrano's or Kopp's. The Rangers really only made it as far as they did because of how good our power play was. So this is really just more of like a team issue that needs to be resolved rather than just an Artemi Panarin problem.
Yeah, and I'm going to make another point here, and you're going to really like this point as well, Eric. When you're looking at the line that Artemi Panarin plays on, he is playing with Ryan Strome, and that does create some damage into Artemi Panarin's stats and the way that he's able to perform, and not just because of the reasons that Eric's going to mention about Ryan Strome being a terrible player, but if you take a look at Ryan Strome and some quotes that he had at the end of the season, Ryan Strome admitted that he was playing injured throughout the postseason, and that was also affecting his play, which in turn was affecting Artemi Panarin's play. So I'll read some stats right here. Of course, when we're talking about his performance during the postseason, we're kind of just looking at the fact that he had 96 points in 75 regular season games, and then the drop off was significant in the postseason. And that's kind of where things get really interesting, because if you look at Ryan Strome, he had this quote saying, "During the second half of the year, I was dealing with the same thing and missed a couple of games. The playoffs, it got worse the last 2 rounds. I was dealing with a pelvis injury that affects both groin and your abs. It felt like I was playing with a knife in my stomach." So when your center in your line is that severely injured to where he feels like he's being knifed in the stomach throughout the game, first of all, he probably should have received less playing time. Maybe you could put that on Jar Gallant. Maybe you could put that on Ryan Strome himself playing with too much pride. But you can also point that out and say Artemi Panarin's play was affected by poor performances from his center. And I think that's definitely a valid argument. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on that? Ryan Strome playing through injury and how that might have affected Artemi Panarin's performance throughout the postseason?
It definitely has a huge effect. Ryan Strome was never really that great of a player, and his stats were really only inflated because he played with the player on Panarin's caliber. So, like, I would just imagine if you were to take like a very solid second line center, let's just say JT Miller, as we discussed last time, and you throw him on that second line with Artemi Panarin in these playoffs, I guarantee that Panarin will become higher than a point per game player. Maybe he's putting up like 1.5 points per game. So it definitely affects it having someone injured who is also happening to be Ryan Strome. So that's definitely a huge factor, and we cannot forget about that when we're criticizing Panarin's play.
Yeah, and again, talking about Ryan Strome, he finished the postseason with just 2 goals on 49 total shots, 4.1 shooting percentage, much lower than his 13% during the regular season. So, kind of talking about Panarin and looking at his stat line, how many more points would Panarin have if his center was scoring more goals? That's kind of just a major factor here, because if the main chief complaint about Panarin is he didn't come to play in the postseason, his points total was too low. Well, you do have to look at the factors that might have caused that points total to be so low. And Ryan Strome not scoring the puck is one of the main reasons why. So, not to just turn this into an episode where we rag on Ryan Strome. I know we kind of do that frequently here on Fireside Rangers. We're not the biggest fans of Ryan Strome. We're not trying to turn this episode into that, but we are trying to highlight that this postseason performance and a little bit of a disappointment from Panarin was not all Panarin's fault. And Eric, you even mentioned it. We did say he needs to shoot the puck more. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs to stop being too cute and fancy. We had our criticisms of Panarin throughout the playoffs, but overall, we do think that, taking a look at his performance in the playoffs in a vacuum is kind of different than looking at it with all of the context and noticing that maybe it wasn't his fault that his points total wasn't so high. So I do think it's unfair to really just highlight that and then say maybe they should go ahead and move on from Panarin, because there are some crazy Rangers fans on Twitter that exist out there, and they're saying the Rangers should try and trade Artemi Panarin. Now, Eric, I know you've got some details on Artemi Panarin's contract. Can you speak to how difficult it would truly be to move Artemi Panarin and his contract and the size of it?
It's definitely going to be a challenge if he does request a trade to get rid of him. He has a full no trade clause, so whatever team that we would want to trade him to, he would have to approve of it. And now I'm not sure what teams he would be open to being traded to. but I'm sure it's mostly better teams who are looking to win a Stanley Cup who don't have that much cap space to deal with. And the issue with that is in the summer of 2019, we signed Panarin to a 7-year, $81.5 million contract, which averages around $11.64 million per year. And that is one of the largest contracts in the entirety of the NHL. Not even to mention that he took a pay cut to come and play for us. There were teams like the Blue Jackets and the Islanders who wanted even more money, but he took less to come play for us, and it's still that large of a number. So if we were to try to get rid of him, I'm sure we'd have to throw in some other assets as well, and probably have to retain a lot of that salary in order to get a team that want to take him. He's 30 years old, 4 more years left on his contract. So he'll be 34 when this contract ends. He's probably getting to the point of his career where his stats will start to decline. So it's definitely going to take a lot of work from Chris Drury to make this trade happen if that rift grows big enough where he would want to be out of New York.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just really can't picture them moving this contract. Like, I can't see a way where they're able to get Artemi Panarin and move this contract to a team. I mean, it would have to be a team with a load of salary cap space. And I don't think that the best teams in the league, as you mentioned, Eric, Artemi Panarin's not going to want to go to a bottom of the league team. The best teams in the league are not sitting around with boatloads of cap space to make a trade like this. It's just not going to happen. So if Artemi Panarin really does get to the point where him and Chris Drury are bumping heads and he says, send me out of here, the Rangers are going to have to take on a large sum of this contract. And they're going to be paying a lot of money in dead cap. They're not going to have the salary cap space that you would want from this. And honestly, I don't know what the return would be for Artemi Panarin. I understand he is, one of the best offensive players in the NHL. But when you're talking about moving the contract as well, you're not just moving the player, you are moving the contract. So I don't even know what a team would be willing to give up for Artemi Panarin. Eric, I know Artemi Panarin is your favorite New York Ranger. What exactly would it take for you to be okay with moving on from him, if anything at all?
I really can't see any way that I would be satisfied with getting rid of Artemi Panarin within the next 4 years unless we somehow pull off the most magical trade of all time and get a guy like Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid, or like Nathan McKinnon level. And we'd have to throw in some more stuff to make that happen. But, if this ends up just being like we trade away one of our superstars for a couple of first-round picks and some like medium-level players, I will be the most upset that I've ever been with the New York Rangers organization. I really can't see any realistic way that Artemi Panarin could request a trade off of the Rangers, and me looking back on that fondly and saying that was a good trade.
Absolutely. And honestly, it would have to take Artemi Panarin requesting the trade, as you mentioned. And I don't know if this is actually going to develop into a situation like that. Again, we're talking about Chris Drury. This is a rumor that he was vocally unhappy with Artemi Panarin. It could lead to a little bit more of a rift. We're reading that there is some sort of a rift, but who knows what that's going to really turn into. I'm taking it all with a grain of salt. If I had to predict, I don't think Artemi Panarin is going anywhere. I think he's going to show up and show out in 2022 and be one of the Rangers' best players, as he always is. So I'm excited to see Artemi Panarin in a blue shirt in 2022. My prediction is he's not going to get traded. I'm assuming you have the same prediction, Eric.
Yeah, there's definitely no way. All I'm going to say is this upcoming season, just get him that solid second line center that he needs and just watch him prove Drury wrong.
Absolutely. I think that is the main thing here. Chris Drury did a phenomenal job in his first season as the general manager of the Rangers, but year 2, the main focus shouldn't be trying to move on from Artemi Panarin. It should be getting Artemi Panarin a little bit more help, getting him that beastly second line center. We actually discussed recently on Fireside Rangers the possibility of trading for JT Miller in our last episode. Make sure to go click on the YouTube channel, check that episode out. Let us know what you think of that down in the comment section on that video. And of course, let us know what you think of this topic, this rumor down below in the comment section of this video. Would you be okay with an Artemi Panarin trade? I assume not. And do you think it's a realistic possibility? Because personally, we don't. We think this is kind of fodder. We think this is just kind of a dumb rumor that's going to spread around and it will die eventually. But let us know what you think down in the comment section below. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe if you're new and ring the bell so you never miss a video. And we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one. And let's go Rangers.
Go Rangers.
He shoots. He scores. Rangers.